It's Monday, May 4th, 2026. It's Groundhog Day in the Middle East, redistricting update, and hard data on church attendance. Next on the AM Update. I've been beating this drum for the last week. It just seems like day after day, it's kind of the same story every day when it comes to the developments in Iran and the broader Middle East. Here's President Trump, who says Iran has given him yet another proposal for making the ceasefire permanent.
I haven't. I'm looking at it up here. Yeah, I'll let you know about it later. But
last night you said we might be better off not making a deal with Iran.
Well, I wouldn't have to. I didn't say that. I said that if we left right now, it would take them 20 years to rebuild. But we're not leaving right now. We're going to do it so nobody has to go back in 2 years or 5 years.
So there is President Trump once again saying that he's got a deal in hand. He's going to be reviewing it, yada, yada, yada. And he does seem to be playing for keeps. I mean, I think he is correct there. If we left right now, which would probably not be the greatest idea, given that they still are gumming up the Strait of Hormuz. If we left right now, then it would take them many decades, many years to rebuild. But we also saw how quickly they supposedly can spin up their nuclear capabilities. So again, so much in flux right now, but it seems like the same story every day when it comes to Iran. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says the economic pain is just getting started for the regime.
To apply secondary sanctions or sanctions on Iran or those doing business with Iran.
Yeah, and Maria, just to remind you and your viewers, this began with the order last March from President Trump on max pressure. And 3 weeks ago, the president gave the order to Treasury, myself, to begin economic fury. And the way to think about that, we were running a marathon over the past 12 months, and now we are sprinting towards the finish line. And I can tell you that we are suffocating the regime, and they are not able to pay their soldiers. This is a real economic blockade, and it is in all parts of government, all hands on deck. It is the blockade that our great Navy is doing. No ships are getting through, and we have upped the pressure on anyone trying to remit money into Iran to help the IRGC. You know, they are a corrupt institution. They've been stealing from the Iranian people for years.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent pretty much telling you there he's pulling and pushing every single knob and lever he has at his disposal to try to hurt the IRGC and the remaining regime. Well, we go from Middle Eastern affairs to Africa, where 2 U.S. service members are missing in southwestern Morocco following an annual multinational military exercise sparking an ongoing search and rescue effort by U.S. and allied forces. The incident happened Saturday at the Cap Dra training area near Tantan, a Moroccan city about 15 miles from the Atlantic Ocean. According to a defense official talking to Fox and other outlets, quote, the incident remains under investigation and the search is ongoing. The defense official also said that the 2 missing service members are Army soldiers who were last seen near Ocean Cliffs near the Cap Dra training area during scheduled training. The soldiers may have fallen into the ocean, according to initial reports. So thoughts and prayers to those involved, both their team members and, of course, their families back home. Just a training exercise in Morocco, and now 2 U.S. service members are now feared, hopefully not fearing the worst, but now feared dead. But again, that is not officially the word quite yet from our nation's military. We go back home, where we've been talking in the last couple of days after the Louisiana v. Calais decision, which basically blew up the key provision of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. You can't draw racial districts for the expressed purpose of giving undue representation to minorities. Now, that's essentially what the Supreme Court said. And we've talked about in the last couple of days the need for Republican governors in southern states to get off of their you-know-whats and start redrawing their districts in order to help Republicans in the midterms, however much good that would do. Neither here nor there. We now have some numbers, according to Kalshi, that is the public betting markets. And I really wish that we had Kalshi numbers without the ability to actually bet on anything whatsoever. I used to do sports wagering, and it was fun because there was an edge and there was some sort of a craft. I mean, it was like, picking stocks essentially, which in and of itself might be problematic to some people. There was a way that you could educate yourself, get an edge on the book, but now the lines are so tight, it's just throwing money away. So I don't do that anymore. And then the advent of these prediction markets for basically anything came aboard, and I just think it's devolved into probably maybe what I think skeptics always said of sports betting, which is always just degeneracy. Maybe I think they're right now. Anyway, that's a little tangent now. I wish we had these Kalshi polymarket numbers without the actual ability for people to be degenerates and bet on anything. Nevertheless, the reason I want these numbers, the reason I like having these numbers is that these markets are not drawn just out of thin air. There's some real data behind these markets. At least you would think so anyway when there's a lot of money at stake. According to Kalshi, the odds now in the aftermath of the Louisiana v. Calais decision from the Supreme Court last week, the odds that these states will redistrict are now well above 50%. Florida, of course, that's basically a near lock. Kalshi only has them at an 83% chance of redistricting, but that seems to be a near lock now. Tennessee, 92% chance of redistricting. Again, these are all before the midterms. Louisiana, 83% chance of redistricting. Alabama, 62% chance of redistricting before the midterms. And South Carolina, a 61% chance of redistricting before the midterms. Curiously, though, it seems like these public markets are less high on the Virginia redistricting actually being made or going into effect, meaning that the Virginia Supreme Court may strike them down. 63% chance of Virginia redistricting, but that is down almost 25 points from just a couple of weeks ago. So something to keep an eye on indeed. Moving on, what happens though, even if you redistrict, the environment right now, just from my intuition, that's just my intuition. It's not necessarily hard data, although you could point at economic numbers. You could point at different trends here, public sentiment about the ongoing Iran war. It seems to me the environment is not at all friendly. Historically, midterms are not friendly to the party that is currently the occupant of the White House. That's just a historical trend. You probably know that already if you're watching or listening to a podcast like this. However, even if you redistrict all of those, let's say all 5 of those states, 6 of those states that I just read off for you, even if they redistrict, give Republicans a huge advantage, I still think it's probably likely that Democrats retake the House. And just to give you yet another example of why, as a citizen of this country, if you are a believer in the God of the Bible, you have a duty to use your citizenship, to steward your citizenship, and not get complacent for anything. Listen to former Attorney General Eric Holder. Yet again, he's been one of the most honest Democrats with what they plan to do once they get into power again. Listen to this.
Out of the House of Representatives the last time, didn't pass the Senate because you couldn't get past the filibuster, largely because Senators Manchin and Sinema decided that they did not want to vote to reform the rules. And so the next time there is that ability by Democrats, if we have the presidency as well as the House and the Senate, got to use that power. You know, one of the things that just kind of gets me is that progressives and Democrats have a reluctance, an uncomfortability with the acquisition and the use of power. And Republicans don't have those problems. Conservatives don't have those problems. So the next time we have that power, we need to use it.
Would that it were, Eric Holder. Republicans have no problem wielding power. That's just a bit outside. Progressives are very restrained, just a bit outside again. But he's talking about the filibuster there. He's saying just out loud, the next time Democrats have power, just the next time they have a majority in the Senate, majority in the House, and the White House, we're going to nuke the filibuster and do whatever we want. He's just telling you that. So yes, as disappointing, and I need to remind myself of this as well, as disappointing as it is, Republicans, just the utter fecklessness, especially in the Senate, the utter inability or willingness to do the priorities of the people who put you into office, seemingly, at least on paper. Man alive, it could be a lot worse. And that's why the Republican Party exists, it seems like. But again, if you are a citizen of this country, like truly a citizen, involved, aware, trying to make yourself as aware as possible of current events and being informed as possible, which I try to help you do here, you just can't get complacent at all, no matter how feckless the Republican Party gets. Because Eric Holder just told you what they plan to do the next time they get power. They're put back in power. So just remember that. Cautionary tale on a Monday morning. Let's go to this. This broke late last week as well. Maine Governor Janet Mills announcing she is suspending her campaign for Senate, meaning that Graham Platner, the darling of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and basically the burn-it-all-down communist Marxist wing of the Democrat Party, Graham Platner is now basically the presumptive nominee for the Democrats in the Maine Senate race. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. We've talked in passing about this Graham Platner, and he espouses all the typical radical lefty talking points from what I've seen as well. But what's uniquely interesting about him is that he's got like multiple Nazi, like actual Nazi tattoos, not the Nazi that, people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to AOC. Boy, I'm getting my tongue back under me. AOC usually calls anybody to the right of Bernie Sanders a Nazi. No, he's got like actual Nazi tattoos, this Graham Platner dude. But with him, he's addressed this before. People can change. People can change. That's the typical line. So Graham Platner, the Nazi tattoo wearing Maine Senate candidate, he is now basically the presumptive Democrat nominee in that state. When we come back, the end of an era. Also, hard data. What does taking your family to church actually entail in the long run? We'll talk about that and more coming up next. Speaking of the aforementioned in passing, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, got it out right that time. She was asked by TMZ Washington, D.C. Well, she was asked this question. You'll hear it and listen very carefully to her answer.
Hey, if you could click your fingers and Tucker Carlson is president instead of Donald Trump, would you do it?
I don't know. I don't think so, but it's kind of a toss-up. I'm not really sure.
Okay, last thing then. What do you think we're going to have first? Are we going to have a female president first or a gay president?
Oh, well, we don't know if we've already had a gay president.
Hey, that's true.
I think there are chances that maybe we have, but I don't know.
If you had...
What does that mean? What does that mean? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, hey, do you think we're going to have either a gay or female president in the future? Saying we might have already had one. Things that make you go, The end of an era. Listen to this.
A lot of crazy stories. We could all write books. I'm sure you've all heard the news the last day or two about Spirit's finances. And we've been using an app to track all of our planes in the sky today. Knowing that it could be our last day. And it appears that it is our last day at Spirit today.
That is the voice of the pilot aboard a Spirit Airlines flight from Chicago O'Hare to Dallas Fort Worth, informing passengers that is his last flight for Spirit Airlines, the 8th largest U.S. airline carrier that shook up the budget travel industry, shutting down its operations after 34 years. The company wrote in a statement on its website, quote, "It is with great disappointment that on May 2nd, 2026, Spirit Airlines started an orderly wind down of our operations effective immediately. Spirit said that customers should not go to the airport as all flights are canceled and customer service is no longer available. Customers with Spirit tickets will be issued refunds." So that is the end of an era indeed. One of the things that kind of did it off, as far as I'm aware, the high fuel costs right now. It was already a teetering airline, but this just kind of finished it off from what I have read in passing. President Trump spoke in Florida at the Villages the other day. Speaking of the Village people and YMCA, he says Melania has a problem.
And she hates when I dance, too, at the end, too. She hates when I dance to what's sometimes referred to as the gay national anthem. You know that. She hates it. You know, that song was number 5 32 years ago, and it went to number 1 32 years later. There's never been anything like it. Never hit number 1. It was number 5 32 years ago, and it went to
President
number
Trump,
1
that was probably the most noteworthy thing maybe he said during that rally in Florida at the Villages. Melania apparently hates him dancing to his signature YMCA. Says it's the gay national anthem. Okay. All right, let's talk about this. What does taking your family to church actually entail or portend in the long run? Well, there's some data that was posted by this account called Clint Teeples and some commentary I'm going to read for you here in just a few moments. What does that actually portend? Well, according to Ilana Horwitz, in God's Grades and Graduation, here's the average grade point average by family income by believers, highly religious people, abiders, believe in God, moderate religious involvement, and those who believe in God with no religious involvement. By far, the average GPA of abiders, those who really believe and those who practice their faith, including going to church, the average GPA amongst those is 3.40, compared to those who believe in God, moderate religious involvement, kind of moderately involved, kind of the culturally Christian. They have an average GPA of 3.24, and those who are very nominally religious have a grade point average of 3.16. So that's one thing. That's data from God's Grades and Graduation. And then there's also this study from the National Survey of Youth and Religion, going back a few years now, but this is still relevant. The more religious the teen, the stronger the moral compass. Amongst those who believe very strongly, devoted religious adherents, those students who would describe themselves as devoted, only 4% say that it's okay to break moral rules for personal gain, compared to 22% who would describe themselves as totally religiously disengaged. 16% amongst those who are devoted believers believes morals are relative, no definite right or wrong, only 16% compared to 63% of those who are disengaged. So that moral compass could not be more different amongst those kids who are being taken to church, who are being discipled, and those who are very disengaged. And on it goes. I'll read you this commentary from Clint Teeples, who posted this data. If I told you there was one free thing you could do every Sunday that would make your kids happier, healthier, smarter, and closer to you, you'd think I was selling something. Take your kids to church regularly. Don't care if you believe the data is so lopsided that skipping it is the parenting equivalent of refusing vegetables because you don't like the taste. Grades. Religious teens, which has talked about this, get A's almost twice the rate of non-religious teens. In a class of 100, that's 24 A students instead of 14. Church gives a kid the same academic boost as being born rich instead of poor. College. Working class religious kids earn bachelor's degrees at double the rate of their non-religious peers. Middle class kids do it at 1.5 times the rate. For families without a trust fund, this is one of the most powerful forms of upward mobility social scientists have measured. Just going to church. Character. Religious teens are far less likely to lie, cheat, or do things they hope their parents will never find out about. They're more likely to care about the elderly, the poor, and other types of biblical equality that we find about in scriptures. Closeness. 60% of parents of religious teens say they feel extremely close to their kid. Despair. Religious teens are dramatically less likely to be depressed, anxious, lonely, or feel that life is meaningless. 90% of devoted religious teens never binge drink compared to 41% of the disengaged. Purpose. Religious young adults report higher purpose, gratitude, life satisfaction, and on down the list. 15 minutes. That's the average distance. Or there's a church within 15 minutes. Basically every address in the United States. Now, finding the right church, that's a different story. But in terms of what you can actually help your kids accomplish in life, all the markers, the data is there. Taking them to church religiously, regularly. The data shows that's one of the things that will help them in the long run the most. Spiritually, economically, mentally, morally. It's right there. Here's what going or not going to church results in. Tucker Carlson had an interview with the New York Times. Bits and pieces of that came out over the weekend. Clips are coming out, continue to come out. Tucker Carlson said recently, quote, one of the reasons, this is not from the New York Times interview, by the way. This was, I believe, from his show. One of the reasons I have a lot of trouble going to church is because all these Christian leaders are so flawed and so obviously fake, I can't deal with it. It freaks me out. That's a quote from Tucker Carlson. Let me read that again. One of the reasons that I have a lot of trouble going to church is because all these Christian leaders are so flawed and so obviously fake, I can't deal with it. It freaks me out. In this New York Times interview, Carlson is confronted by the reporter saying, hey, you said something along the lines of you believe or you're asking whether or not Trump could be the Antichrist. And Carlson responded, I don't think I ever said anything like that. The New York Times reporter reads him the quote back. Now, in the video that came out from the New York Times, it shows a clip of Tucker Carlson. I don't think that the reporter, when she was sitting down with Carlson, actually pulled out a phone or tablet or something and showed him the clip. But it is a real clip. It's something that he said very recently that, hey, people are asking, or, could Trump be the Antichrist? And it was very clear the context wasn't in people are asking. It was clear that Tucker himself was asking. Tucker responds to the New York Times reporter, pointing this out by saying, no, this is nothing I ever said. No, I wouldn't say anything like that. And then he went on to say, I don't even know what the Antichrist is. I don't even know what that means. Carlson, maybe in a clip that you didn't see or hear, also said this about J.D. Vance and different factions within the Trump White House.
J.D. has been subject to, this is well known, but I'll just confirm it, nonstop treachery from people on the neoconservative side.
Who are these people?
Around Marco Rubio. And they have been totally against J.D. Vance from the very beginning.
Who do you mean specifically?
I don't know is the real answer. I don't know.
You're accusing people of treachery, so I'm wondering.
Well, I know there's been a lot of treachery for sure. And I know they were so mad about J.D. getting that job. I mean,
who's they? Within the White House?
I don't know the answer to that.
Who's they? He says, makes a very loaded accusation. There have been people who have been subverting J.D. Vance. I know this. Inside the White House. Okay, who is it? And all Tucker Carlson, I don't know. Who's they? I don't know. I really don't know. This is getting really hard to watch. We're learning now, as I saw Will Chamberlain, I had the exact same thought, and Will Chamberlain just actually posted it. We're learning we weren't actually fans of Tucker Carlson, I don't think, when he was on Fox News. We were fans of the writers and producers around him, who, as it turns out, happen to be exceptional writers and producers, especially the writers, as we're finding out. Because this guy is nuts. So on the one hand, he doesn't go to church because of all of the corruption and all of the scandals, and it freaks him out. I'm telling you, that is a sophomoric objection to Christianity. We are told explicitly in the New Testament, as Tucker Carlson likes to point out, he reads almost exclusively from. We are told to not forsake the gathering of the brethren. That means get thee to church, go to church. Carlson says, I disobey that because of all the scandals, all the blah, 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 blah. Sure. Have there been scandals? Have there been issues, especially within the American Christian church? Yes. Does that change the truth of the gospel, though? No, it doesn't. These are objections a sophomore at a liberal arts college in Oregon. These are objections that they would cook up thinking, hey, I've finally cracked the code of why Christianity is wrong. That's just sophomoric. Literally, quite literally sophomoric. And then just furthermore, they've been setting traps for J.D. Vance. They've They've been subverting JD. Okay, who's they? I don't know. Not only is this just categorically wrong, especially some of the guests' thoughts, ideas that he has entertained, played footsie with, particularly as it pertains to criticism of Israel, which is, as it turns out, just window-dressed anti-Semitism. That's wrong. But now we're just getting into stupid. And you're starting to wonder now, has he just been this stupid all along? And he just had so much credibility to burn through before we all saw that? People are asking. We're just asking questions here on a Monday morning. And that's going to do it. Hope you have a wonderful day. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntire, and this is the AM Update.